All set, Aaron? Thanks. All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this meeting of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Planning Commission's Planning Committee, May 21st. We are meeting in room 280 of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Government Center, and this meeting is also being live streamed on the Planning Department's YouTube page. YouTube, right? Yes. Yeah, Planning Department's YouTube page. So hopefully you can join us virtually if you weren't able to be here in person. Let's go ahead and get started with introductions. I think we have a pretty full agenda tonight. My name is Andrew Blumenthal. I serve as the chair of the Planning Committee. Let's start with my fellow commissioners on my left.
Robin Stewart, Planning Committee.
Teresa McDonald, Planning Commission.
Erin Shaw, Planning Commission.
Melissa Gaston, Planning Commission.
RJ Harvey, Planning Commission. I'm sorry.
And then we'll do staff around the dais as well, please.
Zania Duhaney, Planning Staff.
Kathy Cornett, Planning Staff.
Erin Henson, Planning Staff.
All right, thank you very much. Moving on, first order of business. Hopefully everyone has had a chance to review the minutes from our previous meeting on April 16th. If there are any questions, corrections, comments, concerns, please let me know. If not, we will go ahead and entertain a motion to approve those.
This is Gaston. I make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from April 16th, 2024.
Shaw, second.
All right, motion by Gaston, second by Shaw. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Great. We have 4 mandatory referrals this evening. 2 from General Services for tree canopy preservation and 2 from Mecklenburg County Parks and Recreation. Any questions, comments? We'd like to pull any of those. All right, I don't have any questions myself. I think these are all pretty straightforward. I'll take a motion to approve our mandatory referrals this evening.
This is Gaston. The Planning Committee reviewed mandatory referral codes 24-17, 24-18, 24-19, and 24-20 on May 21st, 2024, and have no additional comments for the submitting agency.
Harvey, second.
All right, a motion by Commissioner Gaston, second by Commissioner Harvey. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, well, thought we might go through those pretty quickly. We're very excited this evening to have Brian and Jim with CATS here for a presentation about the red line and gold line studies. Gentlemen, let us know how you would like to handle. Would you like to go through everything with the Q&A afterwards? Or do you want us to just interject mid-sentence and
Feel free to, ask any questions, but at the end, I can take questions on the red line and then Jim can take questions on the gold line.
All right, let's do that. So, all right, perfect. So you'll be handling red line. Jim will be doing gold line. All right, perfect. Well, again, thank you for being here and take it away.
All right, I'm Brian Adonley. I'm the Senior Project Manager for the red line with CATS, and just going to give a quick update. So the original design of the red line, actually, there's a lot that went into this, but I'm kind of shortening this up. But we did a major investment study where we decided on commuter rail and the alignment. We did some environmental work, but the main design was done in 2009, and that looked at a 25-mile corridor between Uptown Charlotte and Mount Morn in Mooresville. It actually can extend further into downtown Mooresville and beyond, but because the half-cent sales tax is only in Mecklenburg County, we're looking at stopping it as close to the county line as possible as a first phase. Just getting to Mount Morn just makes a lot of sense. That's where Lowe's corporate headquarters is. It's just about less than 2 miles into Iredell County. It would just make more sense there than if we stopped in Davidson. The original design called for between 16 and 18 daily trains. It was mostly peak based, so it was mostly getting people into Charlotte in the mornings and back in the afternoons, which is typical for commuter rail, but that has kind of changed, as I'll talk about. I don't know why that. So what is the O line? That's what you keep hearing in the papers and that. So Norfolk Southern they basically put a letter to all their lines throughout the country, and this one's the O line. It's a single track railroad running through Huntersville, Cornelius, Davidson, and Mooresville. A lot of people think that there's no traffic on that line. That's not true. There are several customers that the Norfolk Southern serves, but it is a very light and low volume freight traffic. And there are parts of the line that they don't run any trains on, but there's definitely several customers that they serve. Pretty much they put together one train a day and serve the customers that need service that day. So what's changed since that 2009 study? I don't know what happened. So after we designed it in 2009, we were looking at ways to fund the project. At the time, it didn't qualify for the federal process that we were looking at. And so we were going through different funding iterations. And as we were getting some momentum, in 2013, Norfolk Southern changed their rail policy nationwide, basically saying that they were no longer wanting to share their freight tracks with passenger rail. So we kind of talked through that and realized that kind of killed the project in a way. I mean, for us to put it next to it, it would have been too impactful. So basically, the Red Line was kind of no longer feasible at that point. And then last year, Norfolk Southern came back to the city of Charlotte, and we've entered into good faith discussions about a transaction for the O-line. So things have changed on their end. So we have been in negotiations with them for the past 6 to 8 months, and that's been going along very smoothly, or very it's a very complex transaction. So, but I mean, both sides are in good faith working through the projects, through the issues. However, if that transaction were to come to be, over the past 10 years, there's been a lot of development and basically every aspect of the corridor has changed. So we can't just dust off the old plans and build it at that point. So an example here is this is the Hambright area up in Huntersville, right above 485. And back in 2009, it was just a clear greenfield, 360-degree of just potential. And now what's happened is a lot has been developed. There's been warehouses. There's a Frankie's go-kart place. There's a super Walmart. There's tons of apartments above Hambright. And the two green areas you'll see there are not really green anymore. One is being developed right now, and the other one is in the zoning process with Huntersville. And so now it's a challenge to find all the ideas we had about where we'd put the station, where we'd put the parking. We have to find potentially new areas or work with the developers to formulate how we'd want to do that. And not only do we have to look at all the old stations, but a lot of new development has happened. One example is at Camp North End back in 2009. There wasn't a Camp North End. There was, some potential there. There's the old warehouses, but what's happened since then? I mean, I think everybody has been there. It's right along the line. You can see the lines pulled up at that point, but we could potentially add a station there. So we're looking at what's changed in the corridor and what we might develop as far as that. So this phase that we're in now, we are looking at uptown alignment. I'll talk about that in a second. We're gonna analyze all those new all the stationaries and determine if they need to be shifted. We'll create a new cost estimate. We have a lot of public involvement and stakeholder coordination. The vehicle maintenance facility for this line, which we envisioned in the past, is no longer viable. So we need to find a new site for that. And so we're looking at site location and feasibility right now. A lot has changed as far as vehicle technology in the past 10 years. So we're looking at all the new developments in that area. And then, because of the pandemic and because, the kind of 9-to-5 job isn't the same, we're kind of re-looking at that service frequency and the dynamics of where people want to go to and when. So at the end, we'll have a 15% design early in next year with that cost estimate. So one of the things with the alignment uptown is, and this map really doesn't do it justice, but just to kind of just to point out that the way we were going to bring the O line into uptown was no longer viable. Things happened when Charlotte Gateway Station was designed, and different projects happened. So we actually had to look at different alignments, and we brought all this to Norfolk Southern. Some of them going through their yard to try to end up on the east side, which is the lower side there. And then looking at taking the O line straight in past Camp North End. And we talked through them, and they actually came to us with some good ideas. And we actually came up with a plan that's pretty similar to the old plan. There's some track shifting, but we feel like we have a preferred alignment that both Norfolk Southern and the city of Charlotte agreed to. You can see the picture on the bottom. That's their yard, like right near uptown, where there's a lot going on as far as rail tracks and service. So I mentioned the station location evaluation. So a lot of things go into that. You know, we look at land use and that land availability that I talked about, that's changed over the years. Also, the distance between the stations. You know, the more stations you add, the longer you're making the trip for the people that are going end to end. So you want to have that balance between, you know, spacing. Commuter rail is different from light rail, so it takes a little longer to accelerate and decelerate. So you have to kind of just balance those sort of things. So we're out in the public a lot, talking with them about where they want the stations to be, and so when it comes to vehicle technology, I mentioned this earlier, that we were looking at your traditional locomotives with coaches that would be pulled by the locomotive, similar to Amtrak style trains. But there's lots of what are called diesel multiple units now. Not only diesel, but there's biodiesel, there's electrical, battery, even hydrogen trains are now being, there's hydrogen trains in Germany and Italy and Canada, and the first ones are going to be opening up in California later this year. So we're going to be analyzing all these different technologies, the reliability of them. One of our biggest challenges is where the second bullet from the bottom, compatibility with the freight traffic. Since we're sharing this track with freight, and we want to have level boarding, we have to make sure that our platform doesn't follow the freight traffic and where they could hit it. So, we have to basically figure out what type of vehicles are even feasible when we're sharing the exact track as the freight. So we have a great little 3-minute video to kind of explain to people the difference between light rail and commuter rail. But the main difference, the light rail are lighter vehicles with that electrification overhead. And in the commuter rail, you're basically sharing that track with the freight service. They're going to be still serving their customers. So they have to be compatible. They have to be heavier vehicles, kind of crash worthiness when it comes to the Federal Rail Administration. So you have to look at a specific set of vehicles. And another major difference is just the length. So our existing blue line that we built, the original one was about 9.3 miles, and the extension was like 9.6 miles. So from Center City, and that's kind of a reasonable distance for light rail. And commuter rail, now we're talking about a 25-mile corridor. So when it comes to like electrifying 25 miles, then the cost goes up and the densities gets less as you get further out. So another consideration. So when it comes to the tracks, so I mentioned that there's a single track, and Norfolk Southern has a 100-foot easement that they could build additional tracks for freight purpose or for train purposes. So there are double tracks in certain sections of the line already, but we will be working with Norfolk Southern to figure out what makes the most sense as far as us building these passing sidings. Since we're going to have trains going in both directions and it's a single track, you create passing sidings where the tracks can pass each other, usually a stretch of like a mile or a mile and a half. You'll see on the map in blue Those are the proposed sidings where the train going in the non-dominant direction can pull into that siding while the other train passes through. And then a lot of the blue area in the middle is where Norfolk Southern's current customers are. So we're figuring out how to make sure that they can serve those customers and not have an impact to our schedule. But the entire line is going to be upgraded. So the tracks out there today, some of it is over 100 years old. They can only run about 15, 20 miles per hour on those tracks today because they're so old. So we'll be pulling up the entire tracks and ties. And then grade crossings, you know, there's over 100 grade crossings throughout this corridor, about 40 public and 60 private. And so we have to analyze each of those grade crossings and how we're going to secure that with gates and flashers. Some of the private crossings that are just the driveway going over the tracks, we'd be building frontage roads up to public roads so they can cross at safer areas. And then the frequency, I mentioned, you know, that the things have changed as far as people's commutes to work. So we're still looking to have 30-minute peak service, in the morning and afternoon. But instead of just having that, we're looking at all-day service to have hourly service in both directions. So every hour you'd be able to catch a train both ways, so that if you needed to get home at 1 p.m., you didn't have to wait till the end of the day to catch those trains. Also going into the night so that people can go to events like sporting events or concerts downtown and still be able to get home. And then we're also looking at weekend service, which we didn't in the original study, and have those special events like football games that we'd be serving. So now we're looking at a potential of up to 42 trips a day. So that'd be 21 trips in each direction. And just, it's about 45 minutes from that Mount Warren station to Mooresville to Uptown Charlotte. That can change depending on what vehicle we choose and the acceleration and that, and how many stations. But that's about where we're at right now as far as trip time. And then finally, we just completed in April our first set of public meetings, and we had one in Davidson for that Mooresville, Davidson, Cornelius area. We had one in Huntersville, and then one in Charlotte, and they were extremely well attended. And then we've had so many comments online and surveys taken that it's kind of unprecedented of the amount of public input we've seen so far. And this is our site where you can go and take those surveys and learn about the project more. But with that, I can just take any question. I'll put it back on if people. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. That's super informative and both so heartening and disheartening at the same time that you've been working on it for 15 years. So at this point, what is the study, like the full study, is the full study that you now need to do, or I should say the restudy, do you have the funding for that? And if so, understanding this is really hard to predict, what do you guys project as your timing in terms of studying and then actual funding to build, and then actually someone gets on a train?
Yeah. So I'll just say so that the study, will be complete next year to get to 15% design. They're currently, CATS doesn't really have the funding to build these major projects. So they're looking at an implementation strategy plan where, they're looking to put a new sales tax on the ballot that would fund not only the red line, but the silver line, the gold line. All these projects are being proposed for a new funding source to build them all out. So the timing wise would be based on that. I think they're looking at November of next year to put it on the ballot. So if they get permission to do that from the state legislature, and then if that gets passed, then we'd be full steam ahead on finishing the design and constructing these projects.
Gotcha. Thank you. And has CATS created a priority list between the projects? I mean, you guys are studying a ton, which is awesome and really admirable. is there a priority list in terms of what comes first, second, third, based on kind of funding and timing and all of that?
That's what that implementation study is doing right now, like that, they're looking at that kind of seeing which projects, you know, some of these projects can be implemented faster. For instance, the red line, because the right of way is already there and you're just kind of pulling up the track and laying down new track. It's actually a simpler construction project. And the Silver Line is a much more complex project with a lot of structures and stuff like that. So they both get, lots of projects can be moving at the same time, but their completion dates could be very different. But that's all being analyzed. But I will say
Gotcha.
politically that, you know, the red line has been, you know, we've been looking at this project for a while, so there's a lot of interest of it getting built.
Gotcha, thank you. So the red line is of the projects being studied would be the quickest and cheapest. And I know I'm not saying that flippantly because I know they're all expensive and not quick, but of the projects being studied, would it be the quickest and most cost effective to complete? Based on what you guys,
I wouldn't say it's because the one thing, and you'll be here, Jim's project is a much shorter project. So this is still 25 miles.
Right.
So, and there's could be 10, 11 stations and we have to, you know, build a vehicle maintenance facility. So, but as far as, I mean, one of the biggest challenges of rail projects is the right of way itself.
Sure.
And this one, it's already been identified. So
Sure.
that's the one aspect that makes this less complex. I'd
Okay.
say.
thank you.
Robin, go for it.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I have a lot of questions, but I'll restrict myself to a couple. Can you talk a little bit about the economics of Norfolk Southern's like existing business on this line? And then the proposal, and I'm sure we're not there yet, but would we be leasing the line from them? We would be investing in track upgrade. Like, how would that work exactly?
So, yeah, they, like I said, they have, you know, just some local customers. Their main customer is a scrap metal place that takes about a train a day. There's other lumber and other customers along the line. So they pretty much, whoever needs service that day, they'll create a local train and hit them one by one. They're the only ones on the line right now, so they can take their time and run it at 15 miles an hour. The transaction, it's under an NDA, so I can't get too much into it, but yeah, it'll be a lease or a purchase or whatever sort of arrangement it is. It would be in control of the city then, but Norfolk Southern would still have to serve their customers. So it'd be, you know, we would have to work that out with them.
I think that's the interesting bit for me is that they've probably got a zero cost basis in this line. They're doing maintenance. Like economically, it doesn't make a lot of sense for them to run this line for a couple of customers that they could probably service by a few trucks a week. Versus, you know, the benefit that the city of Charlotte would get from this commuter line.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm not the only person who's thought of that, but.
Yeah, a lot of people wonder that. And I'll just say, like, this is also a very strategic corridor for them. So even though there's not hardly any traffic on this line, they have to lease their main line. They don't own their main line in between Charlotte and Greensboro. It's the only place throughout their whole main line that they don't own it. NCRR owns it. So every 15 years or so, they have to go into negotiations with NCRR and lease from them. So this is a potential relief valve for them. If things didn't go well, then they could upgrade these tracks and make this their main line. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but I just mentioned that as a strategic corridor for them. So that's why they've always wanted to make sure that they don't lose that leverage.
Where does the line end?
It ends just shortly past Mooresville. So when it gets into the Troutman area, it kind of gets pulled from there, and it kind of Y's there. And so it kind of ends in Troutman, and the other one goes and hits another line that goes to Winston-Salem. So
Thank you.
Commissioner McDonald?
Yeah, I have a couple of, I guess, sort of land use questions, and I don't know if you can answer them, but I'm wondering what kind of acreage you're needing for stations. There's a difference between one in a downtown area versus maybe a more suburban area. And I speak mostly from the Dorida area, so we kind of have that. It's a downtown area, but it's not very built up, so it's kind of a hybrid situation. That was my one question. Oh, and then also for the vehicle maintenance station, just how much land, you know, what you're kind of looking for there, just out of curiosity.
Yes, so, our stations, are just basically platforms that are along, it's going to be in that 100-foot right of way already. There'll be, shelters and we're really looking at these as mobility hubs. So there's going to be a lot of other things at the stations as well, ride share and, bike scooters, whatever other things make sense. There'll be different levels of the mobility hubs based on the intensity of the station. But mostly in commuter rail, we're looking at some element of parking at all the stations except for the one in downtown here at Charlotte Gateway Station. But at least in the past design, we had an element of parking at each station, and that's based on ridership. And so the model, whatever that says. So it could be anywhere between 75 and 100 spaces on the low end to maybe 300-400 spaces on the larger end, depending on if it's more of a regional station in nature. And then when it comes to the vehicle maintenance facility, we really are just starting at the drawing board with that. So we have 25 miles to look at potential locations. Obviously, it has to be along the line somewhere. There's a lot of industrial areas throughout here. Ideally, it's better to have it towards one of the ends of the line, just because, when the service starts in the day, you don't have to deadhead a train to get to the beginning. But, in our south corridor, that was pretty much in the middle of the line. And then we're really kind of making sure that if it is, in an area where there's neighbors, that we really make sure that we think about how it integrates into the fabric of the neighborhood, the way like our South Boulevard one, I think does a good job of, with it all being, some of these can be just very industrial looking buildings, but the one there is, has the brick and stuff like that. So we really want to make sure that we, kind of incorporate it into the neighborhood. But we have to look for the right zoning for a project like that.
Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, perfect. I have a couple as well, but for the sake of time, as long as we have your contacts, we can kind of follow up this conversation offline. Is this a presentation that can be shared with the commission as well?
Sure.
All right, that'd be great. Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, great.
Moving on to the Gold Line.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Jim Fatula, Senior Project Manager with CATS on the Gold Line. Appreciate the invitation to come speak to you all this evening. Wish I could take credit for the artwork, but that is done by one of our sub-consultants, but that is Beatty's Ford Road and kind of how we're envisioning the Gold Line heading out that direction. So just for the next slide. So I wanted to start out talking a little bit about the background of the Gold Line. So as you probably know, it was contemplated as part of the corridor system plan. That was adopted in 2002 and updated in 2019. Originally envisioned the Gold Line as a 10-mile streetcar circulator. A little bit more about the background. Why the streetcar? It has the capacity to accommodate peak commuting hours and special events. Replaces short auto trips, reducing traffic congestion and air pollution. It serves short trips that take you to the doorstop of your destination. Provides modern and attractive transportation alternative. Attracts businesses and residents to neighborhoods, and it showcases art that reflects the communities along the corridor. Phase one of the streetcar with the Gramacos opened in 2015. That was a 1.5 mile corridor on East Trade Street and Elizabeth Avenue. Originally had 6 stops and connected the Charlotte Transportation Center and Hawthorne Lane. Phase two, the more recent phase, opened in 2021 and added additional 11 stops, 2 miles to the west and a half mile to the east, connecting the historic West End and JCSU to Uptown. As part of this project, there was purchased 6 hybrid vehicles, allowing the streetcar to operate off-wire from the Charlotte Transportation Center at the arena through the Tryon Street Mall. So right now we are working on an extension study. So previously this was called phase 3. We're presently referring to it as an extension. 1 second here. So we've contracted with AECOM and have kicked off a study to refresh the existing 30% design plans. The following goals have been identified as part of this effort. So study the remaining 6 miles. So much has changed with Charlotte since the original LPA was adopted in 2011, including policy changes such as the social district on Central Avenue and physical changes such as the redevelopment of the Eastland Mall site. We're evaluating opportunities. Some of these measures include signal priority, skip stop, and a center running cross section. One of the big efforts of this planning study is to improve reliability and runtime. That's a big part of the feedback that we're getting from the public. Evaluate proposed stop locations. So do the stop locations that were identified in 2011 still make sense today? Development has changed the landscape significantly in Charlotte, and we're reevaluating the stop locations to best serve riders and run efficiently as part of the study goals. Update the locally preferred alternative. We're not looking at necessarily where the line would go, but we are going to take a look at some of the street cross sections and what works best. You know, right now the LPA has us outside running through certain areas. Operationally, you know, that presents some challenges with people parking and DoorDash and those kind of things. So, you know, as they park near the alignment, the train can't just go around them. So that slows us down and stops. So we're taking a look at different scenarios, including center running. Refresh 30% design and cost estimate. So once we've settled on that any updates to the LPA, we'll be going back to the 30% design plans to update those. And finally, update the environmental assessment. So a lot of those documents that were prepared back in 2011 have a 10-year shelf life, and so they've expired. And so we're going to be going back and refreshing those. The heart of this project is to connect Charlotte. So the streetcar is part of its goals it's a catalyst for economic boost in areas along Central and Beatties Ford Road, while connecting neighborhoods to businesses, employment, educational institutions, and entertainment. Oh, thank you. Provides critical connection to the overall transit system, connecting over 40 CATS bus routes, bus lines, the Silver Line, the proposed Red Line, Metro Rapid Bus Transit, the BRT, and multiple CATS transit centers. And it links multiple education institutions, including CPCC, Johnson & Wales University, Johnson C. Smith University, and UNC Charlotte. The streetcar is also an engine for economic growth and a tool for real estate development. Approximately 6,600 new multifamily dwelling units are envisioned by 2035, and approximately 3.8 million square feet of new office space 250,000 square feet of new retail, all projected in the next decade. It is estimated that property tax revenues could increase up to $18 million per year in this time frame. So we recognize that timeline is an important piece of this puzzle and something you're interested in. So the study currently underway is intended to put in place the project scope, environmental documentation, and cost estimates so that decisions on funding and schedule can be made. Some key milestones for our study are to revisit the locally preferred alternative based on public input, changing Charlotte landscape, and what we've learned operationally by fall of 2024, so this fall. We're going to refresh the previous 30% design plans to reflect any LPA changes. We expect to complete that in late 2025 and update the environmental documentation through the FTA to be completed in summer of 2026. So we're engaging. One of the things that we just wrapped up our first round of public engagement. So trying to get feedback from the public on some different priorities, including how we serve the most residents, workers, and visitors, how we improve transit connections between major urban activity centers, generate transit investment that creates new development and economic revitalization, supports the city's growth strategy, and support citywide sustainability goals. So at the end of April, we had a public engagement on Beatties Ford Road at the Northwest School of the Arts. We also did one on Central Avenue at Veterans Park in a virtual meeting to really get the public's input on all these different priorities and where that stands with them. Some of our extension study goals are study the remaining 6 miles of proposed streetcar system. Right now, again, that extension on the west side would take it to the Rosa Parks Transit Center, and on the east side to the Eastland Mall Transit Center. Evaluate opportunities to improve reliability and runtime. That really is going to be a major focus of this study is to use technologies and different design changes that we can make those improvements. Evaluate the proposed stop locations. Are there any opportunities for us to combine stop locations or place them in ways that would be more useful? Refresh the 30% design plans and update the environmental assessment. So next step for us as a population and demographics analysis, and that's what's going to be used to inform those stop locations. We're going to analyze alternatives along the corridor. So that's a big part of that is going to be traffic modeling. So we're spending a lot of time and really using some sophisticated modeling programs that have a lot of inputs in them as far as street traffic and where it goes, signal timing, pedestrians, all those inputs are being built so we can really have a good feel for what that runtime looks like and how we can make improvements to it. Our next set of public meetings to take back what we learned on the first round, look at those different scenarios and take something back to the public will be this fall of 2024, and then incorporate that final feedback into the design. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Any questions on this presentation? I did have one quick one. Sure. So kind of realizing that the intent is not to be obviously a rapid transportation method, right? And it's more just stop to stop, like you said, a local service. How long does it currently take to get from one end to the other with the, 17 stops that we have right now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't have that offhand. I think we've got some modeling numbers, but I can get you that answer from our operations folks.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just curious because if we add, a reasonably significant number of additional stops, it's just how long does it take to get from one side to the other? Because again, you're stopping at red lights, sometimes you're blocked, and I think that they recently increased penalties for people blocking the right of way. Is that correct?
They have, yeah, they've started ticketing and towing for that. So yes, that's correct.
Has that been effective?
I think it's helped. I think a big part of it is really getting the public educated to it,
Mhm.
you know, and, you know, once they're aware of that enforcement and the enforcement is ongoing, then I think that's gonna help a lot.
I'll tell you, the first time the streetcar plows your car off the road, I bet that'll teach you.
We just put one of those big bull bars on the front.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
You
one
didn't
of
hear
the
that from
things
me,
that we're looking at, that I think, you know, may be helpful, and this is just something we're looking at, but the public feedback so far has been good, or you know, some kind of semi-exclusive lanes. If there's something to, you know, to do that with mixed traffic where the streetcar may have some type of priority. So that's definitely going to be part of what we're looking at as part of this. So we understand reliability and runtime, and we hear that from you all. So, you know, it's definitely feeding into this study.
And I think that, you know, as a part of the community feedback as well, just reinforcing that it's not meant to go from one end to the other consistently, right? It's meant to go
It is.
6, 8, 10 blocks instead. And that's where it really is helpful.
Right, yeah, yes, and you're right, you know, this is not intended to be light rail service. You know, I think some people do maybe use it for that, but yeah, that is not the ultimate intent of it, right? It's an urban circulator.
Got it. Well, any other questions? Go ahead.
I was just wondering, and I don't know if you all have this information handy, you may not, but in terms of so back when the Blue Line opened, I'm gonna forget what year that was. There was a statistic that CATS in the city and everybody used for a very long time, that we hit our 10-year ridership goal in 2 years. And I'm just curious, what if you all have statistics on what is ridership like on the Gold Line and on the Blue Line now compared to, I know obviously there was, I'm sure, a massive dip during COVID. But has it returned to has it returned to 2019, 2016? And I'm curious, same question kind of on the Gold Line, what's kind of the ridership looks like against, I don't know what would be good or bad, but just kind of against projections on either.
Yeah, so my understanding is the Blue Line ridership is approaching the pre-COVID levels. The Gold Line, it's a bit more difficult because basically it opened in 2021, which is really right at the end of the pandemic. So I know we have not reached the ridership goals. We think that one of the big problems with ridership has really been the operator shortage, and our headways have been 30 minutes up till just a few weeks ago. And, you know, at 30-minute headways, it's not as useful as it could be. And so those 30-minute headways recently improved to 20 minutes. And we think we can do even better than that. And so, you know, once those have been in place a little while, we can take another look at the ridership. But our expectations are as those headways improve, the ridership of the Gold Line is going to improve as well. Sure.
Well, Jim, Brian, thank you. I believe both Monica and Kathy helped to facilitate this one. Whether it's annually or as updates come up, please continue to, whether it's the planning committee or the full commission come back. I think that we talk about this a lot, but as we continue to grow as a city and we have, you know, denser population and everything that comes with that, the corresponding infrastructure and transportation improvements are imperative in order to make that efficient. Yeah. So best of luck with what you're doing. We look forward to hearing the updates.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you all for having me.
Thank you.
All right. So this is our final agenda item of the evening, and something that we've been very much looking forward to is Commissioner Gaston has always gotten on me about overloading the environmental and sustainability presentations. We wanted to make sure that that we really lean in on our residents, our neighborhoods. You'll see as a resource on the agenda, we have 3 of our commissioners, Commissioners Harvey, Gaston, and McDonald. We also have this evening, Andrea, it's Euler, correct? Andrea Euler and Greg Asciuto joining us. Andrea is on the UDO Advisory Committee and resident of the ETJ, and Greg is with Charlotte East. If you guys, I think it is probably the simplest, if you just want to join us up at the dais. I know there's a spare microphone over here, and that one is over here as well. So we'd like to make sure you guys have access to those. Obviously, while Commissioners Gaston, McDonald, and Harvey are on the agenda, that isn't to say that the rest of us obviously aren't still very plugged in and working on the kind of on the boots on the ground aspect of this. I think, I hope you all saw, I sent around a few bullet points the other night. Wasn't intended to be all inclusive by any means, but just kind of a general idea of what I would like to kind of get out of this, right? We're now less than 2 weeks away from 1 year of full implementation with the UDO. Again, we hear from a lot of nonprofits. We hear from a lot of different city organizations, developers. I feel like sometimes we don't hear from our community leaders and our individual residents as much. And I think with those of us seated around here, we have a group that's hopefully very in touch with that. So, Andrea, I'd like to start with you. If you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself. Well, Greg, we'll come to you right afterwards. Just again, kind of your background, the organizations you're involved in, and then you thought I was kidding. I'm gonna let Commissioner Gaston then take it from there and kind of kick us off.
Can I see those questions?
Yeah.
On those bullet points?
Yeah, I got you. But yeah, Andrea, if you wouldn't mind, and Greg, when she's done, if you wouldn't mind, just same thing, introduction, talk about yourself a little bit. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much for having me. And Monica, nice to see you in person instead of just a Zoom head. I am, I suppose, fairly new to Charlotte, moved here from almost 20 years overseas, and have been in the Steel Creek area since 2019, originally from Ohio. And my career there was as an urban planner, land use and transportation focus. And I've worked for nonprofit neighborhood development companies. I've worked as a consultant for international engineering firms working on land use and transportation projects, and also as a city staff planner in a community whose profile is very much like Steel Creek. So my involvement when we moved here was joining the Steel Creek Residents Association. And there are members of that organization who have been incredibly committed to the growth of that area for many, many years before me. So there's a lot of gratitude for the continued effort that they put in and their leadership. So I appreciate the chance to be here and just have a discussion and kind of help amplify some of the work that they do and some of their thoughts.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Greg, same to you.
Hi, my name is Greg. Thank you. I'm the executive director of Charlotte East. We are a community development organization that actually came from the 2001 East Side Strategy Plan, have been in existence for about 20 years now. I just took over as executive director about 5 months ago. This is our first full-time staff in our organizational history. Before that, I served for 10 years as an English teacher at Garinger High School. So planning is not in my background as it is yours, but I feel like I have a pretty good scope of some of the issues, concerns, and positives that have happened in the past year and the past few years in our community. Our focus for some time, particularly last year, was regalvanizing community support around the Eastland development, which is, still an ongoing process. But this year, we're very much focused on connecting residents and neighbors to direct services and programs. So thank you for having me.
Thank you both very much. I guess let's do this actually. So we have, again, there's 6 of us around the dais, but I know that 3 of us, Commissioners Harvey, Gaston, and McDonald, are also very plugged in. Would you guys mind just kind of talking a little bit about your involvement as well, please?
Sure. RJ Harvey, living in Charlotte for past 15 years. Background in commercial real estate and construction. Also had some years of involvement with the land trust, which of course is a new concept to Charlotte, but not a new concept, period. Focusing around affordable housing. That of course led me into a lot of community conversations, definitely with SCRA on a regular basis, and just really around most of the west side and southwest of Charlotte. I try to pop into as many of the meetings and stay plugged into a lot of the organizations there, because there, as the UDO has been unfolding and text amendments added, there's been some questions and concerns, but I think with a bit more of integration of plain speak, I'll say it that way, I think people will be less afraid of it. And so I'm really looking forward to having this conversation today.
So I'm Melissa Gaston, the Executive Director of the North End Community Coalition, which is covers the 8 neighborhoods surrounding Camp North End. And so our organization, we focus on raising for our residents to increase their mobility. And so by doing that with increasing the type of jobs they have and scaling up their jobs, not just providing free stuff for them, but actually do things that are going to change their lives so that if they want to stay where they are, they can stay where they are. If they want to move and take advantage, do all those different things. So that's what we've really been focused on. Prior to joining the Planning Commission, I would see the yellow signs and I'd look at and see what they were talking about, but that was about it. And then I got voluntold about the Planning Commission. And so here I am. Said you need to apply for this, so here I am. And it's interesting that I would say residents, we talk about it frequently at our community meetings, and when I'm out and about, I talk about it, but they still don't quite understand. They still don't quite understand the whole UDO thing and what's going on in the 2040 plan. They're like, well, what does that mean? And I just think, like RJ said, the words are too much. It needs to be brought down to a different level. I've attended some of the meetings in our community, and I'm just astonished that I've had meetings with me and one other person, which was great because then I could focus on, and give out opinions and ideas of things I've heard, but I'm not the only person there. I don't speak for the whole community. I'm not that naive. So I think it's not on their radar. Our residents tend to not react to things until it's right there happening, and then they're mad. Because I get calls all the time, hey, I saw this sign and they're putting this here. What can I do? Well, you missed that opportunity because they sent you a notice and you didn't go, you had, so those kind of things. So it's very interesting. I just think it's a lot of different things that lead into that. So we're trying to get them so that they're more aware. I've been sharing about the app, which I think is good, so they can know, what's happening in my neighborhood. Is that what it's called?
The development near me. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I knew it was something. I got it on my
It's
phone.
helpful. There's a lot of
So
information.
there's a
but it's
lot of
helpful.
information on there. So that helps instead of, they're looking for these signs, because that's not going to do it.
Commissioner McDonald, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I am on the board of the Derrida Statesville Road Community Organization that was really started in about 1973. As I understand it, really around not wanting to be incorporated into the city of Charlotte. So a bit of a history of some tension with being incorporated into the city of Charlotte that long before my time, but it's amazing how much sort of bad feeling still exists around that. But the Derrida area is really right in the middle of, or equally between Uptown and the university area. Right where Sugar Creek and Mallard Creek intersect. And our organization has tried to just be kind of an umbrella for the neighborhoods that are really within about a half mile to a mile of there. And then in our Derrida Matters meetings, we try to keep track of rezonings and land use. I came to this as land use is kind of fundamental to how communities are perceived and how people feel in community. Really comes down to land use. So that is my focus within Dorada Statesville Road Community Organization. And we, we're trying to marry the sort of the old neighborhoods and all the new development that has happened. We've had a lot of new housing added in the last 20 to 30 years. That is all cul-de-sac, one way in, one way out type neighborhoods, a development pattern that really is leaving us with some hard problems to solve. And that's the kind of thing that we're focusing on.
I wanted to give kudos to Teresa. I attend her Community Matters or Dorada Matters meetings. They are like so well organized, and she sends out notices all the time. I'm like, oh, let me jump on this call and look and see. So they really, it's interesting to see the passion that they have there, and the perspective they have. And I wish that all of the areas had the kind of passion that they have. I mean, you really see it. For me, I see the residents where we are in the north end don't have that passion, but all the businesses that are coming to our area and the developers are coming to the area, they really have the passion. And I guess part of it is because it's, I won't say uncharted territory, but it's new to them because it was an area that wasn't really focused on for so long. So there's a lot of interest in the area. And I think we just need to have that balance between the residents and the developers and all those people who are coming in here so that everybody gets to share their perspective and know. That's my thought.
Great. One question that I had, and Melissa, you touched on this earlier, was so we also have Monica, our deputy planning director here, and Kathy, who really ran a lot of the outreach around the community area planning process. You mentioned that it seems like people still don't necessarily know whether it's the vocabulary or it can just be too technical, right? And I think as a part of the whole community area planning process, it was really trying to speak a little bit more plainly and help people understand the impacts of both that process. And then subsequently, we have the alignment rezoning coming up, right? Which is the ability for individuals to chime in about, on a parcel by parcel level, changes that they think should be made, need to be made, right? I mean, obviously, we're not going to guarantee every single thing gets addressed, right? But it's at least an opportunity to have your voice heard. Kind of open question for anybody. Where do you guys, I guess, is there something that we, speaking broadly for staff as well, right? Staff and kind of your ambassadors, those of us on the commission, can be doing to better get that message out? And then do you think people are leaning into that process?
I'll take a shot at that. I think that they are. As I mentioned, a lot of my focus area, while I touch many parts of the city, a lot of it is west and southwest. And so that's through the West Boulevard neighborhood coalitions, SCRA, some other folks there. God, Miss Virginia is going to kill me, but I'll think of her organization in a minute. But long and the short of it is, I think not that there's not complete understanding, it's almost information overload, right? And just a few things, just right off the bat, right? We had the two gentlemen from CATS, right? So we had that whole conversation happening about the Silver Line and all of this, right? That's technical conversation. Then there was Sustained Charlotte, where we're trying to have the environmental conversation. Then we had, of course, just the UDO itself and trying to understand that and how it connected to the overall 2040 plan, right? Then in the middle of that, we decided we wanted to split up how our districts voted, right? And people just can't keep up. It's not that they don't understand, it's just a lot to take in. Do I worry about how I'm gonna get to and from someplace when I quote unquote may not have my home anymore because I've gotten displaced out of it? You know, am I going to turn around and see my single family neighborhood full of trees and all this other stuff that I've grown to love for 30, 40 years, 50 years or more in some cases, that where I'm gonna come out now and I'm gonna see, I'm gonna use some of their words, some of the McMansions and duplexes and all that, and is that going to change that, right? So I don't think that they don't understand. It's just, how do you prioritize so many concerns, you know, all at once, and have enough people say dedicated to it? Because let's say in this area, working class communities, right? You know, many of them, you know, but so folks are still working at 65, 70 years old. We appreciate some of the programs like the homes program and all this kind of stuff. Yes, $500 help and all this, but if we now have $500,000 house going on both sides of them when they bought and paid for their houses over 20, 25 years ago, they just don't know where to start. So I think it's kind of, how do we help streamline the messaging, and how do we help them be informed to prioritize their concerns, if that makes any sense?
RJ, I want to echo every single thing that you just said applies exactly to the east side, particularly east of Eastway, in between Eastway and Harris, right? Like there's, even as a community leader, there's so much information that at times can be just esoteric, even for me, right? Like it gets to the point, how do I explain this and take this down to neighborhood leaders, to business owners? How do I put it in the terms for them that it's like applicable to their day to day, where there's enough interest generated to be able to do this? Now, we'll say, I think staff has done a great job of outreach. And I know like excellent, like reaching out, ensuring the neighborhood leaders are apprised of what's going on, giving opportunities for engagement. But it's just, it's too much, right? It's a lot. So I know we just had East Side Community Leader Alignment Rezoning meeting 2 weeks ago. And it was great. There were about 25 of us at the Charlotte Museum of History. It's about a 2-hour session. Staff got some great feedback, but it's like, how do we articulate what this process is when folks are still really understanding, okay, this is what the UDO allows and this is what it does, but then you're still in situations like, oh, we got a development going right here. Why didn't I get a rezoning notice? Well, because it's by right now, right? So it's like still trying to put these things in terms where folks who are largely working class, how do you prioritize that? So just to echo what you said, exactly. You said.
If I can add on to that mention of by rights, I think that's one of the greatest challenges in communication in amongst our community. And I think the thing we try to remind folks is that there was always by rights development. It just may have come in a different form or a different classification type. I think the connection with the change in by rights densities under N1 and aligning that to the 2040 plan and earlier plans has gotten muddled for residents. They're not understanding why density is being promoted in certain locations. And some of it is just natural evolution and the gravity of neighborhood centers and regional centers. And so that's a natural growth of the urban environment. But I think the sticking point for our residents time and again is the intensity of the by rights. And whereas in the past, you may have been able to do an R4 with an R5 cluster by rights. Now, if you have an R4, you can go up multiple levels and previously there would have been a rezoning and public availability for comment, public notification, and an opportunity for engagement. And that doesn't exist anymore. And people really are gutted that they don't have an opportunity to be aware of the process or participate in the process. So suddenly the trees just start going down. the staff shared with the advisory committee at the most recent meeting some statistics, and I think it was quite fascinating, and I'm really pleased that they did, because it was a big wondering. And that is of the available acreage for development that's classified as N1, being parcels that are 2+ acres, 44% of that area is in the ETJs. 44%. And of that, 62% fall inside other protective overlays. So whether it's a watershed overlay or the airport noise overlay, those were recently brought up as opportunities for some additional development tools to help guide that growth in a more technical way. But I think the question still remains, are those the right tools for those locations? And there used to be a high and a low density level in those overlay areas. And it's not clear yet how the new development tools might reflect those previous restrictions that were put in place for very good reasons. So I think people are having trouble reconciling the old with the new, and that's totally normal. It's a transition, it's growing pains, but I think there's an opportunity for clarifying to the public, first of all, how they can stay engaged, and second, how those new tools under the UDO will protect their investments and protect their communities. And I guess another point on that is, I don't think anyone, at least from the SCRA perspective, is anti-development at all. It is trying to find the right locations and form to grow our neighborhoods and welcome new neighbors to our community, because clearly it's happening. You know, nobody's pushing back on that, but it's how do we welcome new neighborhoods and new economic development, but maintain some of the goals in the 2040 plan of the ambiguous neighborhood character, and those other plan goals of 10-minute neighborhoods and connectivity.
Yeah, I would agree with Andrea. Like, doesn't want to welcome changes, kind of understanding it, you know, if that makes any sense, because you know, in the ETJ and that whole Still Creek area, I mean, you guys are overrun with larger developments, a lot of retail and commercial and all of this all happening. And yes, you have a 485 and Tryon and Shopton Road, all of that, but it's like it's all converging and it's bringing a lot of the traffic patterns back into some of the same existing streets and arteries. And we're saying we want to create these 5-10-minute neighborhoods, but we have to think about the makeup of those neighborhoods, right? Specifically speaking, who are they and where do they work? And what do they need for services? Because if, let's say, again, taking SCRA and putting that conversation, overlaying it with, say, West Boulevard, right? That we both kind of share that airport space, right? But how many people on the west side, I can tell you, and on or about number, actually work in that, and that budget is larger than our city budget. So I get the idea of it, and we can throw the clinics and hospitals and stuff in there, but based on who's there, where do they need to go to get the care that they need? And so if we have, say, folks in the ETJ who may not, who may have different types of jobs, right? I'll say it that way, right? That many of your needs possibly could be met in that 10-minute space, you know, or I could do remote work, and I can, you know, I can move some of my appointments to the middle of the day. But how do we, again, help prioritize folks over decisions being made around them, right? And how do I make a living? Because, I mean, hell, we've all been to the grocery store lately. You come home with 6 bags, you spent $100. So I got to focus on how I'm going to balance my budget in here. And I know that this is going to impact me, and I don't want to be scared or reactive, but how? So.
One thing, and either Kathy or Monica, frankly, I'm probably not the best person to speak to it, but is about the alignment rezoning process, because I know I referenced it earlier, but that is a really good opportunity for residents to, kind of like RJ said, speak to, well, kind of everybody, right? Where is the best location in that community's opinion for something to go? So I think that's important. And then, given that, frankly, all of us around this dais are educators to an extent, right? In the sense that we, in theory, know more than the average resident of Charlotte because of what we do. And I feel like it's our responsibility to convey that information the best we can. One thing that I frequently find myself reminding people is that the city can control land use, but the city is not a developer, and the city is not a like a landlord, right? So we can't we can't tell a company to go build on that corner. We can't tell a dentist office that they need to be in Derrida. Like, we can try and put the land use to allow for that, but then it does kind of, I think the community leaders can lean on some of these businesses and try and fill that gap to an extent, right? Just because the city can't mandate that. I call it like the Field of Dreams approach, right? Like, if you build it, they will come. If you put the land use there, the best that the city can do is hope that the appropriate users are going to come fill that in. Right? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's just kind of how I see it, because sometimes people are like, why we want a CVS here? And it's like, great. We can put the zoning here, because this is something that I saw in the community area planning process. Like, all we can do is put the zoning that's going to allow for a pharmacy to be on this corner and serve the community. But we can't call the CVS real estate department and tell them that that's where they need to be. Right? And so it's kind of an all hands on deck, right? And that's where, myself, Aaron, we represent some of the real estate and development community stakeholders. And that's where we can come in and talk to them like, look, guys, there's going to be new opportunities around the city for some of these different uses. We need to be able to take advantage of that as well, because it's mutually beneficial to the residents, but also to the business owners. All of that coming back to my original point, though, about the alignment rezoning process, and Monica or Kathy, whoever wants to speak to that a little bit, I just think it's really helpful to understand what that entails.
Not putting you on the spot at all.
No, that's
fine. I mean, that's fine. That's
I'm
like our job.
definitely putting you on the spot.
That honestly is our job. So the alignment rezoning process, what would you like to, like an overview of what it is, the
Just-
timeline?
For Greg, Andrea, for everyone around, if we're talking to somebody who's unfamiliar with the process,
Sure.
what is the message that you want us to convey to them as it relates to the best way for them to engage?
So right now, out until the mid-June, I'm looking over there at that team. The policy map is out and live, which is the policy map is that future land use plan. So what we would like to see and what is appropriate based on market study and the comprehensive plan, the 2040 plan. So that's out for comment right now. That's the second time that it, has been out for comment. So then the area planning will happen the next round of meetings in the fall, and that process. So the map will be open again during that time, kind of as a partnership with that. Then that map will be adopted again by city council. So the goal is that really reflects the community's vision and what at a granular level on parcels as to what people would like to see. So the alignment rezoning is really a companion piece to that, because it puts in place, you have a future land use, which is your vision. That's what you would like to see, but that might not align to the entitlements for that site. So meaning you might want something to be a neighborhood center, but its entitlements are general commercial, meaning it could just be like a drive-through, right? Whereas you might want a more walkable form, like a neighborhood center form. So after that policy map is adopted, the alignment rezoning team will kind of take the baton and start working on rezoning all the properties to align to that vision and policy map. So there will likely be some overlap in the engagement of that. But the goal is that, I mean, we really can't rezone the properties until we know that the vision is as accurate as it possibly can be. So that's kind of the process that the area planning team's going through. So
Oh, that's helpful.
yeah, so the alignment rezoning, I mean, we did it with TOD 4 years ago, 5 years ago, which we had up-to-date land use policy for all of those areas so that we could align them basically at that time. And so now we're kind of going through that process for the whole city. And so I know there's been some breakfast. The last breakfast was last Friday and around the alignment rezoning. Oh, I was sitting next to Melissa, part of it. Yeah, and Teresa, you guys were there. But so they're really working to build a network of communicators about that process because it is that is a very technical process, and it can get into the weeds over like what I'm allowed to do, what I want to do, what the policy map says, you know, what people feel like they are entitled to. You know, there can be a lot of very specific parcel questions from a homeowner to maybe, you know, a large industry person as that goes through that alignment rezoning process. So they're building their army right now with the breakfast of getting people kind of in the know as to what it is and what the steps will be.
The reason I think it's so important though is because again, while that map is open and say for the next 3-4 weeks is the next period, right? Any resident in Charlotte can go on and add comments to that. You know, and that's why, again, when it comes to feedback, right now, that's, in my opinion, by far and away, the most effective way to have your voice heard. Yeah, no, go on.
How hard would it be right now in this meeting to demonstrate how that would be done so that if anybody is out there watching this, the information is there in one place? That's just.
Aaron, is that something you
a
could pull up in the
suggestion.
background?
Yeah.
That'd be great. Thank you.
I'm itching to say this. So I understand, you know, the realignment process because I'm here. And so, but the average resident has no clue about the realignment process. When they hear that and it's advertised and say, hey, come learn about the realignment process. And, you know, it needs to be something as simple as, hey, this is allowed to be in your neighborhood. What do you want to see in your neighborhood? Because then people are going to get it and they're going to be like, wait, you can put this in my neighborhood, but that's not what I want. I want to have something else different in my neighborhood. Or I think it should be this, or I think it should be that. I just don't think it connects when you say the realignment process. What does that mean? You know, so I think that would be beneficial to residents. I think, you know, I don't want to say dumb it down, but break it down into layman's terms so they understand. I participated in a town hall meeting with James Mitchell, and he was talking about rezoning. And he said, you want to build what in my neighborhood? That's what it was called. And they packed the chamber to come because they're like, oh, I understood that, you know? So I think that's one of the things, even if, you know, that's your title, but underneath have something or somehow promote and say, hey, you can build this in my neighborhood, but what do I want to build in my neighborhood? Or, you know, something to that effect.
Well, and honestly, like that conversation about that you just mentioned, and that is part of the tension in the process is because that we want those conversations to happen in the area planning process piece of it so that the alignment rezoning is the next step and that there's predictability around that and that there's those tough conversations around what's appropriate are happening not at the alignment rezoning step, but at the area planning piece of it, where it is a little bit easier to understand, but everyone gets riled up when something goes from like, I would like to see this to I'm going to see this, you know, that is a big leap.
So that should have been during the area planning process, not the alignment rezoning.
I mean, yes, I mean, there are going to be nuances to this, but our goal is to have this policy map here be as like the percentage of change between the policy map and alignment rezoning. The goal is to have that as small as possible. Like there's always going to be parcels that don't end up changing or maybe have certain reasons why not. But the goal is that what the vision is what is allowed. Like,
Gotcha.
is what people can do.
So when I get all those people who come to me and say, hey, I need to have this restaurant, I want this particular restaurant, or I want this particular grocery store to come and be on this corner. I'm gonna be like, hey, no, that doesn't work like that. To your point, which
Yeah.
I know, I can't say, and the city can't say, you need to be here. But I think residents just they don't get it. And so what happens is the things that happen and develop in the communities is based on the developers, the people who have planning backgrounds and things like that. I'm with you. But they have no knowledge of it, so they don't do it. But the people who have that kind of knowledge, because it's that skill, that background, because the average person who's the CNA or the social worker or whatever has no clue about any of this, so they don't understand it. And they just know, okay, there's this yellow sign, or they said they can build this, and now I see all these duplexes and triplexes coming up, and you say it's going to be a neighborhood one center, or what does that mean? What does that mean? What's a neighborhood center? Well, I just say it can be a strip mall, or, I'm just giving, so I think that's part of so even though you want to keep it narrow as to what actually happens, I still think people need to be aware of it. And I'm going to say in our corridor, all this is on the internet and you can go look at it. These people are looking at stuff on their phone. They not, like most people aren't looking at it on their laptops or desktops because they don't have it. Their connection to the world is the internet. How friendly is this for your mobile, on your mobile, is it?
Andrew, I know you wanted to say, and then we'll jump to Aaron for just a brief demonstration.
I think I just want to echo some of the thoughts about tension and confusion. It's I think some of it is also the phasing and the timetabling of 2040 plan, area plans, UDO, trying to get people to understand it's a living document. It's going to continue to change. But I think folks are commenting, they don't understand why the development tool options and the text amendments are happening ahead of the alignment rezoning. And if those toolkits are going to even be appropriate for what may be forming later. And so I think that there's a question of why isn't this happening ahead of then adjusting the UDO text to not be a barrier, but be a launching pad for the growth that's going to happen.
Yeah, just a couple comments that the community area planning process wasn't the whole, this isn't the whole thing of building the map. So if you remember the whole policy map, that was a whole year long of hundreds and hundreds of comments. So to some extent, we feel like somewhat heartened that there's not as many comments now because there were so many comments and meetings during that process. We really honestly do feel like we've heard a lot of the things that people had to say about it, and where we could address it, we did. And of course, we will continue to do that as well. And the other thing is it is optimized for the phone. So if folks do want to use it on the phone, I think actually this body was the one that brought it to our attention that it wasn't working very well on the phone. I can't remember who it was, but it does right now.
So for the revised policy map to be able to comment, anyone can just search the Charlotte Future 2040 comprehensive plan, and it'll come up with our homepage. And this is the first thing on the homepage. It's right here on the landing page, and you can just click this revised policy map button, and it will open the map itself. So it has a little bit of a notice there. So you can search by an address if you have a specific parcel in mind, or you can zoom into the map and find your parcel if you would prefer to do it that way. The parcels highlighted in yellow have already been flagged for revisions, correct?
Mhm.
So, for example, if you,
By, and, staff makes comments as well as, the public, yeah. So everybody's a stakeholder.
correct. And that's public. If you click it, it will demonstrate what the comment is, what the place type was, and then what the revision is suggested to be. So if you did want to zoom in and do it that way, you simply just click on the map and it can give you a little bit of information, or you can click the little flag icon here if you want to place a pin, for example, and provide your comment, and it will just walk you through the information requested. So the location, whether or not you agree with the designation that's existed on the ground now. So that would be that neighborhood 1. If you did not agree with that, you could click no there. And then why not? Which place type do you feel is more appropriate? And then why? And then it'll just ask for some information simply for tracking purposes. And then you'll click create and it will log your comment for staff to be able to see on the back end.
Is there a key somewhere on that? Is there a key somewhere on that site that describes what a neighborhood 1 is? Or like I saw you had to drop down the new place type. Cause I can just see people saying, this revised policy map of what? I could just see it. So.
The description of neighborhood 1.
Okay.
Is there a video still?
Yeah, that is something that could be helpful is while you're looking at the additional,
So the policy map manual also offers a little bit of information, and we're accepting comments on this as well.
Where else here?
Right.
Know what. Correspondence.
So this offers some additional information on the place types and the process itself. So that's also on the homepage. If someone wanted to reference that, that's the second button here.
Two things. Going back to something that Andrew mentioned earlier, kind of about that, and Melissa at the same time, about what goes in my neighborhood and how that all happens. Let's say specifically from Andrew and Aaron's space, that they can have conversations with folks who are coming in. Have we had any, we meaning the city, any of the boards, had a conversation with, I guess, kind of mid-level retail commercial folks to say, hey, if you bring these types of businesses here, let's say any of the incentives, let's say like some of the money that just came out for the BDOs, right? That what you may have done as a part of the process before, meaning traffic count, all that kind of stuff, you still can do that because we know you need to do your modeling for your business coming in. But hey, here could be some ways to attract them more. So
it's like an economic development.
Pretty much, yeah.
Perspective.
Yeah. Have we had that conversation? Are we, is there somebody that we could send them to?
You can always send people to economic development, and I'm happy to give, we have a few different program managers in economic development that kind of do similar type work.
Okay.
And some of the, specifically the funding around corridors of opportunity that's in this upcoming budget year is geared around like site selection and kind of site readiness and how to prepare packages for site selectors and kind of pitch harder the things we want to see in our community. And that is all being run out of Arta. I'm not going to pronounce her last name correctly, but Arta runs the business program, business revitalization program in economic development. And she is basically runs point on facade grants, business matching grants. She'll be doing the work around the site readiness piece.
So any sort of incentivization.
Yeah, I mean, we have
like round peg, round hole, right? In terms of the uses that people want. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, if people have good ideas, we work really hard to get them located there. We don't typically pitch to retailers like national retailers to try to get them somewhere, but we've been working really closely with a couple BDOs around like food insecurity, anyways, trying to get a sustainable model around some of the things that people do want to see.
Okay. 'Cause
Well, there's some other
That
ones
was
around,
me
like-
not in my planning hat, but more in my
Yeah.
connecting the dots
Yes.
hat to
I
other
think
things.
There's some other ones too around like reusing historic or existing buildings or any sort of like public artwork or something like that right there. All the grants that go towards that kind of stuff as well, but just that's 100%, but it's partially an incentive,
So-
right?
Yeah, and there's a lot of that, and I appreciate that. I want my neighborhood to be pretty. Trust me, I do. I want people to know that they are in Clanton Park or they are on Revolution Park Drive. I want them to know all those wonderful things. However, let's say if we think about it like this, on West Boulevard, from the corner of West Boulevard, and I'm going to screw up the name of the street, but it's the street right after South Boulevard, Camden Road. That's it. That's a Fifth Third right there. From that point, all the way until you get to Billy Graham Parkway, actually until you get to the outlet mall, there is no bank. We, outside of New York City, have the largest collections of banks on the East Coast, because they're still taking the same modeling from a footstep thing. How many cars are passing me? How much money do these people make? So forth and so on. So unless we connect that economic kind of conversation, how many, even if it's mid-level or regional, let's say there are regional banks, Park National Bank, Regions, that if we can attract them, even if it's not for a brick and mortar thing, and we need to say educate folks around homeownership and financial literacy and all those things, but literally they go to an ATM that's inside of the store or on the outside of the store that charges them almost $6, and they don't have a place to go and deposit it. So even if we're not having a conversation with larger folks, but technically we have some of those retailers as hometown companies, and they're not going to invest if it's not going to make sense. Especially, let's say in my example, banks are not in the business of losing money at all. But if incentivized, and we saw that years ago when we had Chiquita Banana here, I got my money, I'm out. So if we incentivize folks, then we can now, again, to have some of those realistic conversations around EDC and what the community needs and wants are. So.
Agreed. And do you mind, could one of y'all pull up the Charlotte East presentation very quickly, if that's on your thing? I think it's slide 3, because I want to echo, and Monica, I know you've heard this from Charlotte East before, some of the concerns specifically with economic development, the one prior to that. So like with the blue, right, that's Eastland. I know Andrew, you made the comment too, like the city's not serves as a landlord. Well, in this situation is very unique, right? It is. And it's 80 acres. It's our, and you know what, but it's that exact loophole that's been such a detriment to economic development in our area, despite great programs like the corridor program, what is going on right now, the BDO investments. But even with this concept of alignment rezoning, what comes to my mind and what I hear from folks, there's this level of disengagement because like the ship has sailed for them, like the land is gone. Like, so right here around Eastland. So Eastland is the big blue triangle, right? 260 apartments. We're having 70 senior that are going to come on board this year, and then about 160, I think, single family homes. There's 400 multifamily right to the south that's being up for rezoning right now. All of these blue dots, I mean, these are either affordable housing or just standard market rate housing, right? And where's the investment? Where's the growth? And understandably, the market drives investment, but at the same time, our folks can't live and work in the same area. We don't have that. Like the concept of the 10-minute neighborhood doesn't exist. And this is an area, obviously, where the childhood poverty rate is 36%, right? This specific quadrant, the 28212 zip code. So when we're talking about housing is such a key, we have 1,000 new units coming on board right here in the next few years, right? And if that 400 multifamily passes, we're gonna have a lot more. But where are opportunities for mobility? And especially, you know, when we talk about how far out the gold line is, which we hope will bring economic development without a ton of displacement for businesses along Central, how can we assure that that's going to spur that same type of growth that we've seen around historic West End, which is great. Smith, they're doing awesome stuff over there. But it's just your comments and the comments about alignment rezoning too. I think what I hear from so many stakeholders who've been engaged with these processes throughout the year, particularly with the Eastland saga, is why do I continue coming to the table, right? And, you know, and I know the work that staff is doing, like, I know how hard, like, staff is working, and it's just been the historical frustration through different, I guess you could say, not city managers, but just different eras that have come through. It's like, okay, we're disconnected. And then you have such a demographic shift where now a third plus of our folks speak languages other than English, right? So it's like, how do we connect with those folks too in language that's, again, like pretty esoteric? So you hit a point with me there that I was just like, this speaks really, really loudly to the East Side community as well, particularly along Central and Albemarle.
Yeah, and I think that is something that and I'm gonna borrow something from Andrew's comments. Field of dreams and ideas. Have we considered, I mean, you guys do amazing. I couldn't even imagine sitting in front of hundreds of angry folks, and although
I'll just say that like the business district organization work is basically founded in that model. So, I mean, no plug, but S3 is out right now. And I mean, there's a full funding capacity building grant out right now that is being managed by Arta, who I mentioned earlier, and Aaron Gillespie as kind of the more executive manager that is taking ARPA dollars and basically funding people to do that work. And there's categories of the types of work. And anyways, so, I mean, it's not completely foreign that that's happening. That's on the business district side of it, not necessarily like the neighborhood coalition side of it, but you know, we have to start somewhere. And I think that around the business district work, we have a couple examples locally of strong business districts. And I mean, you have Melissa and Greg here who are actively working in their communities on that work. And so anyways, I mean, Charlotte is in its infancy in that type of work compared to like a Midwestern city like a Chicago or Philadelphia or even in Atlanta. But, you know, again, we start somewhere.
Do you think it would make sense to have somebody like Art to come in and present to the planning committee?
I mean, sure, if you're really focused on like the economic development side, I mean, that team can come and kind of present the suite of things that they do. I mean, we have we have resources for entrepreneurs and AMP up. I mean, they have a small business team. They have Arda who deals kind of at the intersection of like small business and place. Anyways, I mean, so if you think that is a value, then would be happy to connect y'all. I mean, I sit on economic development, senior leadership also, and obviously in planning. And so it's an easy connection point. There's a lot of intersection between our two departments and the things that we work on. So
I think it would be helpful because the planning committee specifically, I think, is an opportunity to be a little bit more granular in some of those conversations. Whereas the full commission meetings, again, that's where I feel like we paint with broader strokes in those meetings, right? Whereas here, we don't necessarily have to do that. We have a little bit more free reign. And I think that this past fiscal year, hopefully everyone agrees, we've done a good job of bringing in other people to present to just help educate us, because at the end of the day, that's what a lot of this is all about. I don't want to kind of pivot this conversation much, but just keeping an eye on the clock. I did have one question just for everyone. And again, I know that there's been some allusion to this. And a lot of this conversation, and by necessity, is what can we be doing better, right? But I asked this question at the risk of silence. What are we doing well? As you talk to residents around the city, whether, you know, each of your respective areas or even Rob and Aaron represent different stakeholder groups, what do you see that the city, again, a year into this, from your conversation, that the city is doing well? What is resonating? What is sticking? Things that we should look at as successes out of this? So, go for it.
I can mention the Sugar Creek corridor playbook process was a great event that happened for us in Dorida, and just an opportunity for a lot of people to get involved. And it made sense to people because we're talking about this particular part of our community on the ground. And that was awesome.
I think with the UDO Advisory Committee having a chance to examine the text amendments and have some discussions about that, I think that's been a great opportunity for some contributions from across the city and a lot of different perspectives. And certainly that committee there isn't a consensus there. There are a lot of varying viewpoints, and it is very technical, and it's hard. It's a lot to process. I wish there were more time to process the information that comes through, so we can have time to feed it back to our member groups, to our residents, and not just residents, but also, you know, the developers that are coming to us to say, hey, does this sound like a good idea to you? Can we, you know, would you support this, or how can we make an adjustment that would better fit the community? So I think while I do feel that part of the process is very positive, and I will also say I can see in the specific language that some of the voices and concerns that have been raised, sometimes loudly, sometimes in whispers, it's being listened to. I can hear those comments because I'm shared on that on the back end of it from other residents and community members. But I do see it reflected in some of the language of the text amendments. And so I really commend that it's a hard thing to do. is to build that language into this kind of ordinance, and make it functional. So I think that's been helpful. I do wish there was more time to process and look at, okay, can you give us a case study? Can you give us an example? Can you show us how if we applied this, this would be the result, versus if we did this, this would be the result. Which do you feel is going to be more beneficial? And there isn't time to do that at the moment.
I would say one of the things that I think we're doing well is just that access. Even if there's questions, there's still, I think, in all of the years that I've lived in Charlotte and worked in this kind of community space, that there has never been this amount of access to city staff and transparency as much as, can be shared and digested at the same time. So that I definitely think we're doing well at. I think investments in ideals and thoughts around food insecurities, i.e. Three Sisters Market and other co-op marketing spaces, and focused conversation around affordable housing. Even if we know that we still have more work to do, I appreciate just the opportunity of what has been happening and what is continuously happening.
I would echo what RJ was saying. I think the access and the dialogues that are happening have been great. And I think it's made an impact on people, not everybody, but it's still, the people are still feeling more connected. Those who have become involved and who never knew anything about it, they're still, they feel like I can give my comments and people are going to listen to what I have to say. So I think that's been a good thing that's happened out of this whole process.
Yeah, and I'll
No,
share
go for
positive
it.
as well. I mean, community engagement has been phenomenal. There's so many opportunities, whether digitally, in person, to engage, and it's not just the top level leaders. And I also really appreciate, and the equitable lens and focus and attention that planning has paid to every part of our community. Sometimes I feel, whether it's dealing with, the county, the city, whatever, priorities are focused really proximate to Center City. Right. And then, okay, if we're lucky, to expand here. But I feel what planning has done, we feel as equal in terms of focus, that in what we're getting as everyone else. So I think that's been an awesome job from what I've heard from residents.
Awesome, thank you guys. Any kind of final thoughts, right? I mean, I hope everyone agrees. I think this has been highly productive and long overdue. Well, we did it. We did it, Melissa. We did it.
Thank you very much.
But any final thoughts before we wrap things up?
I do. I think one of the messages I was asked to convey here is that there really is a different level of service and infrastructure and capacity in the ETJ areas. And I don't think that gets the attention that is needed as decisions are being made. Transportation is a huge sticking point. On our end of town, we are a massive commuter route for everything coming up through South Carolina. And so even just managing the over 200% growth within Steel Creek itself in the last 20 years, I mean, think of all the other economic development that is pulling up commuters who are making use of our infrastructure to the detriment of the current and future residents. And I don't think that that's fully looked at in the review process. I think there is certainly an individual development by development look at where projects fit under whatever thresholds, but the threshold level has also changed under the UDO. So previously what might have required a traffic impact study no longer does. And the cumulative effect of all of that development has not been looked at in the aggregate. So we don't know as a community how much more capacity is there, what more can we absorb and still have a livable community and still make space for growing our neighborhood centers and those other resources. I think some of the things that are forgotten are a good bit of that available land that I mentioned in the ETJ isn't served by city sewer. And that's because they were originally designed in the past for larger lot sizes who could handle the septic systems. And that was also more appropriate given the critically protected watersheds and protecting our drinking water resources for a regional area. So I think there's some environmental factors that still need to be considered. And I think there's one last thing that keeps coming back because people are hoping this could be an opportunity, not just a scare tactic, but our area sits in zone 1 of the nuclear evacuation and impact zone for emergency preparedness around the Catawba nuclear station. Our evacuation point is UNC on the other side of town. We're not getting out. We can't empty our schools. We can't empty our hospitals. We can't get people out who have mobility issues, our senior centers. We can't get people out. And here's the opportunity. There's state and federal funding for improving infrastructure in these areas. And it would be fantastic if our community leaders could help work to leverage some of that, to improve the infrastructure, allow for appropriate growth, and consider public health and safety. There's also some comments coming through about environmental justice and that you can't keep shoving certain populations who are most vulnerable into an area where they can't be served. So those are some of the comments I was asked to bring forward.
No, I very much appreciate that. I think that it's not much yet, but for what it's worth, and you've probably spoken with some of them, the 4 of our county commissioners actually pulled the county appointees of the planning commission, myself included. And we did have a separate meeting. This is a few weeks ago now, specifically about paying more attention to ETJ issues. So I'm sure it hasn't been reflected yet, right? But just know that it's been put onto our radar with what limited purview that we have as an advisory board, but we also have a microphone. And so we understand that. And so I appreciate you continuing to raise it and just know we hear you.
Well, I think that I will say thank you, and I think you are putting proof to that action by inviting us here and giving us a chance to sit at the table with you and talk these things through.
And well, of course, and to that point, I think I've probably taken enough of your Tuesday evening. Thank you both, Greg and Andrew, so much for being here. Inclusive of the two of you, I think we're in a unique situation where we are both the students and the teachers, right? In this room, frequently we are learning from whoever's presenting to us. But on the flip side, as soon as we leave this room, that role flips, right? And so we look as an opportunity, again, to echo what I said a minute ago. Tonight has been incredibly productive. Thank you to Commissioners Harvey, Gaston, McDonald, Stewart. I think it's been very insightful. And again, you have our contact information. Please don't ever hesitate to reach out if there's anything that we can do, and know that that might be reciprocated. We may need to reach out to you guys if we need some insight into your parts of town, whether it's a rezoning or anything else. But again, thank you all for being here so very much. One final thing, I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Boom.